The script that they have prepared is sitting in their subconscious, and they are just waiting for that to come to fruition. Hi guys, how's it going? Welcome to Going Dotty. I'm Trace Egan, and in today's video we're going to be discussing the premeditative nature of the ego. So let's crack into it. As we've already discussed, the ego is a creative being. It's a lazy creator, it's a negative creator. An ego is an individual who isn't interested nor capable of moulding the natural forces of life that make things come to fruition, that make things come into effect, and that make things occur. When we're talking about creativity, and when we're talking about a creator and a creative being, the definition of creation that I'm working off for this premise is that creation is quite simply the act of doing something. It's achieving something. It's making something happen, and it's making something occur. So when you have a lazy creator or a negative creator operating in the form of an ego is still a creative being, and therefore it is still managing in some slower motion perhaps, but it is still managing to make things occur, make things happen, and make things come into effect in its own life. So that's what this video is about. We want to start looking at that in a little bit more detail, and we want to break down really how the ego goes about creating things if the ego fundamentally doesn't really want to make anything occur. And one of the ways that it does this is through its premeditative nature. So much of the creative functionality of an ego comes from their conscious system, their internal awareness, and indeed their mental body and their mental body grid and self. So what this means and what this translates as, for this video anyways, when it comes to the premeditated nature of an ego will consider in advance that which it wants to occur. The ego has an inner world, it has a rich inner texture, and within that inner world of the ego, it has various different people, places, events, situations, circumstances, and things that are happening on a day-to-day, daily basis in its own life and world. So when the ego, or when an ego-orientated individual, a person who's operating from this kind of low calibration conscious format, when an ego wants something to occur, remembering that the ego is always relying on the external for its awareness of self, for its validation of self, for things to happen and be created by it, for it, through the external. The ego always has this sense of pressure that it's putting onto the external world, but it also knows the characters in its life and world that it has to play with. So whenever the ego decides, or an ego decides that it wants something to occur, one of the first things it'll do is it'll look to the landscape of its world around it, and it'll figure out who or what within that landscape can generate for it that which it wants to occur. When this is a little bit more emotional in nature as opposed to materialistic in nature, if it's more of a mental need or an emotional need, this is when the ego will manipulate people in its life and world. It will know the characters that it has, the pawns in its sphere of existence, and it will know indelibly how to mold these people, how to put pressure on these people, how to manipulate the situation. It knows and can read very accurately the true character of people, and the ego, who purports to be unaware of energy and unaware of intuition, is still an absolute expert at reading energy, at reading intuition, in being able to know what somebody is willing to do, in order to be able to tell how to go about doing something in order to elicit the effect that they want to occur. In order to make that happen, the ego has to have thought about it beforehand. It has to have had a moment within its own self where it is considered what it wants to happen, how that can occur, how it would set that up so it can magically happen for it around itself, who the characters are involved in. The ego will create a full narrative and a full script of everything that needs to happen. By the time the ego actually finds itself in that moment of manipulating the character, the pawn on its chessboard, the ego truly will have forgotten its earlier premeditated moment. And this is one of the really interesting things about the conscious structure. It's something that I picked up from the book Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts, which is what is subconscious in one moment may very really have been conscious in another moment. And this is something, this interplay that we see happen a lot with an ego. The ego will genuinely be in that moment of manipulating somebody, and they will have completely forgotten everything that they had thought about before. The script that they have prepared is sitting in their subconscious, and they are just waiting for that to come to fruition. In that moment, it really is the true membrane that they don't remember, that they cannot be accountable for the manipulation that they are bringing into effect, because the ego is genuinely very unconscious of its true nature, of its true form. It doesn't realise that it thinks about things in advance. This is one of the really jarring and unsettling things about people who are so deeply enmeshed in their ego, is they do things and then they completely forget that they do them. If you try to say this to an ego, if you try to highlight or voice your concerns, the ego genuinely will not see what you're talking about. The ego is all about preserving the self. It's all about protecting the self, and it will reject any information that highlights any sort of criticism or anything that it doesn't want to hear. It will just shut down. So we can see that egos are often acting in the moment through a prescribed event that it has created in a previous now moment from the ego's perspective. And that's really, really difficult, because when you're in that situation with somebody, when you are in, let's just say for the sake of this example, a one-on-one dynamic, it could be at work, it could be at home, it could be in a professional relationship, it can be in a private relationship, it really doesn't matter. If somebody is interacting with you and bringing that interaction to the table, but if they've already thought about everything that's going to happen and the only thing that they want to occur, you're going to feel that around you is like a force field. And you'll wonder to yourself, why can't I move? Why do I feel unusual? Why do I feel strange? Why do I feel uncomfortable? Why can't I gather and generate my flow? It's because the energy body of the ego has set itself in a certain formation. And then your energy body is however it is. But when their energy body interacts with your energy body, it's going to affect your energy body. So when we're with other people, we're not on our own. We're in a shared moment with another individual. And what that individual brings to the table very much affects us and the experience that we have, how things go for us, what we can remember to do. There's very many ways that the energy body of another person affects our energy body and our energy system. And if that other person is a negative, lazy creator, if they're a negative person, if they are a toxic individual, and all of the things that that means and represents, that's very much going to have an effect on your system. Especially so when these are long-standing relationships. If this is somebody that you have to be putting up with, on an ongoing basis because they're a family member or because you work side by side as a colleague, it's very, very hard to get out of these dynamics. This is why the understanding of the energy body or the energy structure becomes very important for many people at a certain stage of their journey, because the normative element of things that is described, on the ground in the mainstream at the moment really just doesn't cover all of this in as much detail as it warrants. Egos aren't really conscious and grounded within the construct that they are. And egos are really terrified on one level of the true nature of their form and that which it is that they want to bring to fruition. So we can kind of understand why anybody who is in this type of operational system, this egoic operational system, this low value conscious construct, why if they're in this role and they're getting away with it, why would they put in any extra effort or any extra energy to improve when the world keeps on passively returning to them that which they're looking for? So that's not an excuse for behaviour, it's just trying to place some reasonable understanding for why these things are coming around and about and coming into effect. Is Eckhart Tolle, in his book A New Earth, one of the ways that he defines the ego as being the voice in the head. And I just want to extrapolate on that for a moment. We all have thoughts and we all have multiple voices of self, if you want to put it that way. We have different aspects of the personality and the character. We have different facets of self. What Tolle is talking about is that instead of an individual having a conscious awareness of self and being able to interface within the self appropriately as and when it needs to. You know, we all need to be able to use our thoughts to guide us in the moment, to help us focus and concentrate, to organise the self and the next task. There's multiple thoughts are just really interesting, and when we're talking more about the mental body system and construct, we will go into that in a little bit more detail. But for now, if we just consider that we have multiple threads of self, we have multiple layers of life that are going on simultaneously, and it is a different thread of our self, of our energy body, and of our energetic system and being that is active in any one time. And this is why it's quite difficult to manage our inner psyche and our inner self when we don't have a roadmap for it, because you can be in one place one moment and then you can move into another element of self very quickly without necessarily realizing that you're doing it. You know, spirit moves within us and through us as it does. Our larger nature is something that sometimes we are almost subject to it, as opposed to being a commanding officer of that spirit. You know, wouldn't that be nice if we could do at will what we wanted and what we needed to in the mood that we wanted to be able to experience it in? And so this is why we work on our personal development, so that we have a greater awareness of self, so that these tools are more manageable to us and for us, because we understand that which we are. But bringing it back to the ego has the voice in the head. The voice of the ego is very negative, it's very grandiose, it's very much got this attitude. And the attitude doesn't really serve anybody else but the ego. The ego likes to put itself on a pedestal, it is better than other people. So the voice in the head of the ego is not a positive voice, and it doesn't benefit anybody. It's not bringing any positivity to the table. The very functional nature of the ego is to be negative. That means reductive. It means to withdraw. It means to take things away. It means to reduce. Negative doesn't just mean bad. That's not a complete equation. Negative is just anything that takes away from. And the voice of the ego is very negative. It's very judgmental. It'll look at somebody. It'll cut them down. The ego is programmed to reduce all of the elixir of life away until it's left with nothing, because that is the reflection of the ego's internal motion externally. The ego is not able to tune in with the core of its being. It's not able to tune in with the inner self. It's not able to access the wealth of its inner world. Therefore, the ego-orientated person takes this model and projects it on the external. It removes value from people. It belittles. It pulls the rug under from others. It does anything to reduce the status of those that it does not respect. And yet, it's all about a power play as well. So when the ego wants to be in an exalted role, it will hold itself in a different manner. This can very much affect the reality and the lucidity of other people who are experiencing living under an ego. And that's another topic that we'll get into on another day. So for this one, I just want to say thanks so much for your time. Please like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Thanks very much.